What is new, everyone? We have the meta snapshot for patch 12.19b. There was a slight patch, very minor, Terra nerfs, some dragon nerfs, and a few bug fixes here and there. But let's just get right into the compositions. There are some new things that's running around. First things first, in the S tier, we have Dragons, Jade, Olaf reroll, Mirage Daeja, and Karma reroll. Some people were playing it last patch, but it's really taken off in the B patch. And then in the A tier, we have Dragonmancer Lee Sin, Guild Zippy, Xayah, Darkflight Rengar, Grave Seraphine, Lagoon, Mage Nomsy, Whispers, and Built Different. I, for one, am happy that Xayah finally leaves the S tier. B tier, we have Astrals, Darkflight Cannoneer, and Graves Nilah. Keep in mind, with the Astrals, you can still play Astrals in the early game for Econ, but the full-on reroll Astral or going for Aurelion Soul right now is sitting in the B tier. C tier is a bunch of all the unviable stuff. It's not that you can't win with it, it's just going to be much more difficult to, so I really recommend sticking with the S and A tiers because there are just so many comps in those two sections. We're going to go over how to play every single one of these in order, but first, a quick word from our sponsor. If you like quick and competitive game modes unlike TFT, I think you should give Mech Arena a try. Mech Arena is a game where teams of giant robots fight against each other and shoot each other up. What's even better is that you could also play with some of your friends on the same team. Right now is a particularly interesting time because they just added world-famous soccer star Neymar Jr. coming into the game as a limited edition mech pilot, and you could get him for free just by playing. In Mech Arena, it's always good to have a pilot in each of your 5 mechs, and this one is definitely the strongest one they've released yet. He can boost the damage of 2 different weapon types when other pilots could only boost 1. He can increase your missile and assault damage by 35%, which is more than any pilot in the game right now, and he also has his own perk, which is the Sprinter perk. This increases your mech's sprint duration by 40% and makes its cooldown 40% faster. Whether you want to make fast mechs even faster, or shore up some of the weaknesses of some of the tankier mechs, he's going to be the go-to pilot for you. The best part about this is that you can get him for free just by playing the game, and here's how. All you have to do is play the game on 7 different days between October 6th and December 18th, and he's yours. It's super easy to do, and if that wasn't enough to convince you quite yet, Mech Arena is finally available on PC so you can enjoy the full cross-platform experience. Last month they already added in controller support. If that's not enough, if you install Mech Arena on mobile or PC using my personal link or this QR code, you will get a free starter pack worth around $15, which includes an amateur crate, 300 A coins, and a Pulse Cannon 4 to help kickstart your game. You can also feel free to add me in-game by copying down my profile right here. Thanks again to Mech Arena, but let's get right back to the video. Alright, we are back. We're going to start off with the one and only Drags. Even with the dragon nerfs, this is still top tier because it is just one of the strongest late game caps you can have, and fast 9ing right now is much more viable than in previous sets because there are so many economy traits. I believe there are there 3 of them? There might be 3 of them. Mirage, Pirates, Astrals, and Lagoon. There might be one other one that I'm missing. Oh yeah, Shimmer Scales. So there's 3.2 of them since Mirage is like only happens every so often. But essentially the way to play this is you get a win streak augment, you build up a huge economy, and then you go fast 8, and then once you fast 8, you realize, hey, I don't need to roll that much. I can go 9. That's when you want to go for this comp. Also, if you have a bunch of mana regeneration items such as Spear of Shojin, Rageblade for your Aoshin, some good tank items for Terra and Idis can use almost anything, and then just leftover AP items for Shyvana, you're going to be chilling. I wish I recorded a game where I played this. One of my friends was spectating me. He's like Master Zero LP, and he was like, oh, I've never actually played the Dragon comp yet. Are you sure you can do it this game? And I had like random ass items. I had like a Rageblade and a Static Shiv that I slammed early on because I got Gadget Expert. And I said, trust me, you can go Dragons as long as you have HP and gold. And we went for the Dragons. I think we had like 1-star Aoshin, 2-star Terra, 1-star Shyvana, 2-star Idis, and we only lost because this other person hit Zoe 3. So we got second place that game. We were literally only stopped by a 3-star legendary unit. And yeah, that's the power of the comp. If you're able to hit it, it's really chilling. But of course, you have to know when to go for this, when not to. And we have some notes here on the website, bunnymuffins.lol/meta, if you want to check this out more. And there's even an S++ tier that you can get if you if you manage to hit this specific augment, the Dragon Soul augment, so definitely keep that in mind as you are playing this. oh, and we have the counters here for some of the comps. I guess a counter that we forgot to add is 3-star legendaries, you know? That is one way to counter almost every comp. So that's why we don't actually put it there. But onto the next build, we have Jade plus carry. The Soy Fen build is what it's called by some people. Soy because Shio Yu is soy, S-O-Y, and then Fen because Siphon. So people are calling it Soy Fen on the street these days if you're one of the cool kids, you know. And this is like the paramount like 4-cost carry comp right now. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 4-cost carries, or tier 4 carries as Mortdog likes to call them. My favorite part about this is look at the Siphon and the Shio Yu. They use the same exact items. So what that means is you build the Titans, you build the Bloodthirster, you build one other sword item, and you could put them on whoever you 2-star first. A lot of times when you're playing like a Xayah carry comp, for example, let's go to that right now. I know we're skipping around a bit, but it's important to know these small details. So in the Xayah comp, let's say you hit a 2-star Xayah. Great, right? You put the items on her and you're good to go. But what if you only have a 1-star Xayah? Are you really going to put all your items on your 2-star Zippy? Probably not, you know. You want your Xayah items on Xayah. So it's less consistent in that sense because you're relying on hitting one specific 4-cost carry or tier 4 carry, whereas this Soy Fen comp, on the other hand, you're looking for 2 of them and they use the same exact item. So if you hit Shio Yu 2 first, you sell your item holder, put all your items on Shio Yu 2-star. If you hit Siphon 2 first, do the same thing but with Siphon. That's the beauty of this composition, and that's why it is very popular, it is flexible, and it's consistent. That's recipe for S tier, you know? Only requirements is like the items, I would say, but it's pretty easy to get because they use a bunch of different components. They use mainly swords, but you can make use of bows, chains, negatrons. The only weird one is belt, but belt you could always throw on one of your tanks, so it's not the end of the world. But pretty much any sword or bow item is going to be at least okay on them. One thing to note is that you do prefer doing a Shio Yu carry, but again, if you're getting a 2-star Siphon, it's going to be fine. Another good thing about this composition is if you get a lot of AP, you could throw those items onto Jace, and that's pretty good too. Some of the counters to this comp is the Scalescorn comp because they take reduced damage from both your dragons, and of course the turbo only drags comp is going to beat that as well. Onto the next build, we have Mirage. Mirage is a little interesting because this comp flexes into a lot of other different builds. So Rageblade, you could go pretty much anything. You could go Daeja, you could go Xayah. You could even use this to turn into the full dragon composition because Daeja and Aoshin share a lot of the same items, and Nunu can use the same items as Terra and Ida, so you could pivot between the two as you wish. So there's a lot of flexibility in this comp right now. Your front line is also pretty flexible. You don't have to run the Cavaliers as we're shown right here. You could instead drop down to maybe 4 Mirage, just run Daeja plus Yasuo or Daeja plus Nunu, and then go for a guild comp because guild's really popular right now. Or you could just do something like throwing in an Idis and Leona because Leona is also a Mirage. So if you like flexing between different units, but not necessarily different comps, like let's say you want to be a Mirage one-trick, but you don't want to be forced into buying the same exact 8 units every single game, Mirage is going to be the comp for you. My favorite part about the website right now is that we have a lot more info on it. So we have like how to play the early game. Like Ezreal 2-star is going to be great for this with Leona 2 and having other Guardians out there. And we also go over some of the Mirage variations. One of my favorite ones so far is the Pirate one, and we go over exactly how to play that here. Is the most consistent options with Mirage are the AP variants. That's like Warlords. I guess Duelist isn't actually AP, but it helps out Daeja a lot. But the only weird ones are like Electric Overload and Pirates, and we go over how to play those two over here. And the longtime users of the website may have wondered like, oh, how come there's so much more information now? Well, I teamed up with someone who is one of the top players in North America right now, Void Sins, and he's been top 10 in a lot of the recent sets and like a challenger every set as well, things of that nature. So it's good to have other people chime in and stuff just to get other perspectives. Olaf Scalescorn is going to be the next comp. We talked about this briefly before, how it counters the Soy Fen comp, because again, Scalescorns are just good against that because, I mean, they take reduced damage from a dragon, so it makes a lot of sense that they do, right? But another thing is that you do need to get like Olaf 3-star, so Olaf 2 is going to beat Siphon and Soy 1, right? But if they get to 2-star, they're more expensive than Olaf, so theoretically, if the game is balanced correctly, those team comps should beat the Olaf comp. But if you get 3-star Olaf, since that's since that's difficult to get, you should be able to beat them back, you know? There's a lot of different power spiking between different TFT comps, and that's just one of the examples that I laid out here. So if you're going like 2 or 3 cost carry, of course you're going to be outshined by a 4 cost carry if the game is balanced. Key word there, but you always have to look for your win condition, and one of the win conditions for this comp is getting a 3-star Olaf. So if you get an early Olaf, you want to sacrifice him really early, because Olaf, if you guys didn't know, he gets attack damage every time he dies. So if he dies a lot, he's going to hit harder than if he lived a lot. So I know a lot of people, they're like, hey, how come this guy's Olaf that's 2-star is outperforming my 3-star Olaf in like different games or whatever? And that's probably one of the reasons. Some people don't stack their Olaf, or they're like win streaking too hard with Olaf, and he doesn't die in those wins, and then he just doesn't get that much attack damage, and then he kind of falls off in the late game because of that, especially if you build around having that much attack damage. If you build something like a Runons and Infinity Edge that really rely on the amplified attack damage that Olaf can get, your build's going to be weak if he didn't die a lot. So if you have to build him differently if you don't get many stacks. It's not the end of the world if you don't, but of course always try to stack him. Because if you are like turbo win streaking, like I'm not going to say not to win streak and sacrifice your Olaf instead, because you could just get a lot of gold and pivot into something else, you know? Also, like, big note here, it's big and bold, you know? You don't have to play this exact variation that we see up here. There are a couple of other different ones, such as a mage one with Zoe, there's one with 4 warrior, there's one with like fewer Scalescorn. There are a couple of different things. It depends on what units and items that you're hitting during the game. But the main point of this composition is to reroll for Olaf 3-star at level 7 and pretty much go from there. Obviously, sometimes you could do it at level 8, but most of the time you're going to be doing it on level 7. On to the next build, we have Karma Reroll. So interesting that we put Karma in the front line, right? Also interesting that we don't have a blue buff on her. A lot of people think that blue buff Karma is the best build, and this is a common misconception, because in the last set when we did Karma Reroll, the build was blue buff, Jeweled Gauntlet, Infinity Edge. Nothing wrong with that. But in this new build, we're putting her in the front line. So what does that mean? How does that change things? Well, first of all, blue buff, what does it do? It generates mana. Okay, that's fine. Karma likes mana, so she could cast a bunch. But if you're in the front line, you get mana when you take damage. So you don't need blue buff as a mana regeneration engine, because you already have it by being up front. So you'd rather have a healing item, such as Hand of Justice, in order to heal back up after you cast your spell. Another thing you guys might be wondering, like, why do you use Hand of Justice instead of Bloodthirster or Hextech Gunblade? Nothing wrong with those 2 items, but typically, when you're going in an Infinity Edge build, Hand of Justice is always going to work out best as a healing item, because you get additional crit, and that amplifies your crit damage even further, because IE gives you 100% crit chance, and then all the bonus crit chance you get gets translated into damage. Notice here, Olaf, IE. What's his healing item? Not a Bloodthirster, not a Hextech Gunblade, but it's a Hand of Justice. Now let's scroll up a little bit, and let's look at Daeja. Okay, Daeja does not have an Infinity Edge. Hextech Gunblade it is. Soy and Siphon, no IE. Bloodthirster it is. You know, so different types of carries use different items. It doesn't mean that, like, if you get the wrong healing item that the game's over. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying if you're able to choose every single item for like best in slotties or whatever, for healing item choices, that's generally the rule. If you have Infinity Edge, Hand of Justice is going to be better. If you don't have it and you're a frontliner, Bloodthirster's typically better. And if you're a backliner, typically Hextech Gunblade's better if you're not facing assassins. But yeah, Karma's been creeping up in the meta right now. She's like good for top 4ing, but you just need to get the right augments for her. And of course, have a lot of copies of her as well. So the way to play this comp, it's really easy. You just reroll for Karma 3-star. Early game, you want 4 Dragonmancer if possible. And you typically slow roll at level 5 for hitting Karma 3. But if you do have a lot of Karmas in the early game, you can roll at level 4 at stage 3-1 instead. This is called hyper rolling. And this is really good if you have, let's say, around like 5 Karmas. The math averages out so that when you're re-rolling for 1 cost carries at level 4, you typically hit 1 of your desired unit every 5 rolls. So every 10 gold, you should theoretically hit 1 Karma. So let's say you have 5 copies of Karma with 50 gold at stage 3-1. generally advisable to roll down. That doesn't mean go all the way down to 0. Let's say you roll down to 20 and you've hit 0 karmas. Stay at 20, don't roll down to 0. But let's say you have 50 gold and then you roll down to like 30, but you hit a couple more karmas. Let's say you hit 2 or 3 more karmas, then yeah, go to 0 at that point because you're going to have a good chance of hitting it. So just because a play is correct at the beginning of a roll down doesn't mean it's correct in the middle of it. It's like in poker. If you start out with, let's say, ace king suited, but then the flop comes out and it's complete garbage, you don't have any pairs or anything, no straight draws or flush draws or whatever, the hand that was good in the beginning all of a sudden became kind of mediocre, you know, so you got to adjust your play accordingly when that happens. Support items really good in any Dragonmancer comp because the only unit you care about is your Dragonmancer user. In this case, it's Karma. So after that, you'd play a lot of support items. For example, double Chalice of Power to buff up your carry even more. Anti-heal such as a Morello or Sunfire Cape is pretty nice. Static Shiv reduces magic resistance, so that's good too. You could also do like ZZ Rot portals because that gives your team more tankiness. Yasuo also, his best item is blue buff, so that's why you see it on him there. All right, moving on into the A tier, we have Lee Sin to start us off. Another Dragonmancer comp, IE, JG. This time we do have the Hextech Gunblade. You could do Hand of Justice as well, as we were talking about earlier. Some people like the extra healing that it gives to the rest of your team. Some people like Bloodthirster for more survivability. Honestly, again, like any 3 of the items will do. It really depends on what items you're hitting that game. I think we actually forgot to update this image, but I think I prefer Hand of Justice a little more than Hextech Gunblade. But again, it really doesn't make a difference at the end of the day. But very similar to the last build, except for you reroll at level 7 for 3-star Lee Sin instead of level 5 or 4 for Karma 3-star. The only thing I will note is that augments are super important for this comp. If you get Eye of the Storm and you hit Lee Sin 3, you're winning the game. If you're getting Axiom Mark or Thrill the Hunt, that's also incredibly good too, because he kills every time he kicks most likely, and that just means you automatically proc these 2 things. Another thing to note is that if you have Thrill the Hunt or Celestial Blessing, you don't even need a healing item at all. You could just go for pure damage instead. Overall, pretty solid comp though. You really need best in slot items though, so always prioritize at least IE and JG for him, and you should be good from there. On to the next build, we have Zippy carry. Zippy's kind of like a hybrid Xayah build. It's kind of like what you can use to transition into it, but you could also reroll for Zippy. That's pretty good too. If you could get Guild Spatula, you could drop that on Xayah or Daeja to really amp your team to the next level. Guild Spatula is probably the best performing spatula item or emblem item because you can't actually build it from spatula. But it's definitely one of the best, if not the best emblem. And if you ever get the augment early, like Guild Crest or Guild Crown, just take it because it's just the best thing ever. I promise you, it's better than almost every other option you could get. We go over a little bit about how to play the early game. You could use Astral Shapeshifters as your start with Nidalee, and then Titan's Resolve, Bloodthirster, really good if you want to start building Zippy items early on. And these also flex into the Shio Yu and Siphon comps, so you could flex between the 2 comps really easily. And you want to roll at level 7, hopefully at 3-5 if you're rich. But sometimes you could wait till stage 4-1 and roll for your upgrades there. You really just need Zippy 2 to stabilize. That's the most important thing in the world. You could also use the Zippy as a tank. If you look at the Ragewing Xayah build, for example, Zippy can hold stuff like Sunfire Cape. He could hold like all the Jace items that you see here for tankiness until you hit Jace 2 or Shyvana 2. So always keep that in mind. You don't have to play this comp. You could flex between that comp and the Xayah Ragewing comp, because if you ever get Shyvana and you have like perfect Xayah items and Xayah's 2-starred, you'd rather go for this comp than the other one. Like the Zippy comp, it's good, but you need to get a little lucky in the late game. If not, you fall off, such as hitting a Zippy 3-star, and that's just not that reliable. And you typically want to either hit Zippy 3 or go fast 9 into either the Dragon comp or just add in a bunch of random legendary 2-stars to this build. But speaking of the Xayah Ragewing comp, we're kind of combining these into one section because they are very similar. Like one has Xayah as a secondary carry, the other one has Zippy as an item holder for Shyvana and Jace. So they're pretty much the same thing. But again, if you're doing more focus on Zippy, you focus on the Titan's Resolve and the Bloodthirster. But if you're doing more Xayah, you focus more on the Ragewing, maybe like a Last Whisper or Giant Slayer. Xayah can use every item. She really just needs a Rage Blade, and then anything else will do. But you typically roll for the Xayah build at level 8 instead of level 7, so that's the one major difference. So you have to think in your game, oh, like, here's a decision point. I am low health, and I'm level 7, so maybe go for the Zippy comp in that case. But if you're, like, high health and, like, pretty good gold, you could go level 8 on maybe 4-2 or 4-5 and roll down for Xayah and all the goodie stuff there. So two different ways of playing the same build in that sense. Onto the next build, we have Darkflight Rengar. Rengar, yeah, he's really good. Again, notice the Hand of Justice with the IE combo. And yeah, assassins are back in the game. If you ever get double trouble with this comp, this comp's like S+ tier if you get double trouble, but it doesn't always happen. The reason why it's so good is because you run 2 Rengars, and I mean, that's what double trouble is all about at the end of the day, right? It's especially good in Darkflight because you get an item on each of your Darkflight units. So you get like 1, 2, 3, 4. You get 3 extra items because you have to sacrifice a Sejuani. And that's really big. I guess Swain technically gets the item, but since Swain isn't in the back for the Zeke's Herald, you could triple item your Swain, no problem. But this comp is like pretty easy to play. That's my favorite part about this. You really just need early game Zeke's, and you're pretty much set after that. Another thing that makes this S+ tier is if you ever get Force of Nature or Tactician's Crown, as it's called now. If you get that, you are gonna do really well because you could use that item to sacrifice into the Darkflight Essence, and is essentially turning your Force of Nature into a real item, or your Tactician's Crown into a real item. And that just means you have +1 item, and you also have one of the best items in the game because you get an extra unit. So it just completely snowballs your team out of control, and it definitely becomes S tier at that point. If you don't get that, Zeke's Herald is fine, and yeah, I'm not going to complain about that. As for leveling, you want to go level 7 and roll for 3-star Rengar and Rel, and also find Swain at that level. And that's pretty much it. It's a really easy composition, and yeah, like just keep in mind, like you could use Rengar 2 items, you could use him 3 items, but only 3 item him if you get best in slot items, because typically the Zeke's Herald is good enough, or also the Darkflight Essence is good enough as well. You could triple item your Swain though, because he doesn't get anything unless you're doing the Darkflight Essence thing. But onto the next build, we have Grave Seraphine Pantheon. This one got a bunch of nerfs in the previous patch. Hasn't been touched in the B patch, but I definitely noticed that the popularity of this build went down a lot. But that's fine, it's still pretty good. It just means it's less contested now. Remember, everyone was playing Zyra and Seraphine in the last patch, but now it's like maybe 1 or 2 people are playing it instead of like 3 or 4. So it's a little different in that sense. But this comp's really good for stabilizing in the mid game because you roll on level 7 at 4-1 for like a lot of upgrades, because they're all like 3 and 2 cost units. And also if you hit like a 1-star copy of your 4 costs, it's like you don't need the 2-star copy right away because you stabilize with the Seraphine, like the Zac, the Zeri, and the Rakan. You don't need like the 2-star Graves to fully carry yourself in stage 4. So that's what's good about this. It's good for just getting a lot of leads in health during that stage. And then at level 8, of course, you could roll back down again, hit the 2-star Graves, and put in like an extra unit such as Bard. But yeah, all the item recommendations down here. Again, it's on my website, bunnymuffins.lol/meta. There's also some other good stuff on the website as well. If you go up to the top, we have like item guides, we have leveling guides, and a bunch of other good stuff on the homepage as well. So if you scroll down a bit, such as like different playstyles you could use, tips and tricks, all that good stuff. But back to the tier list. We are on the Lagoon comp. So for the Lagoon, Soam, and Nilah build, this one's also pretty easy to play. You generally decide to play this very early, and that's if you have good mana items for either Talia or Kaisa, and then you could use that to pivot into Soam. And like if you have a Morello component, that's like even better. But you want to play Lagoon as early as possible to start building up your economy, because you get bonuses every time you reach a certain Lagoon threshold. The Lagoon table's down here, so it's like at 20 you get 2 1-cost champs, 35 you get 2 gold, etc, etc. You can read all that here. And the way you like build the early game board into the late game board is you use Kaisa or Talia as your item holder for Soam, and then once you hit Soam, typically you roll down for him on like stage 4-1 or 4-5, depending on how much gold you have and how much health you have. You just sell those units, swap the items onto Soam, and then use all your spare attack damage items on Nilah. As for tank items, ZZ Rout's the most important one because Sylas just isn't that tanky, so he doesn't get as much benefit from having like tank items that we see here. So if you get like 4 ZZ Rout portals, that actually might be better than like the tank items you see here. But of course, it's like hard to get 4 of one item, you know? But onto the next build, we have Mage Nomsy. Only play this if you can get Mage Nomsy in your game, obviously, because it's impossible to play without it, right? Nomsy really likes Spear Shojin and any ability power. So it could be like double Rabbit on Death Cap, it could be double Archangels, it could be a mix of the two, it could be a Jeweled Gauntlet, something like that. But you just play him and you just play 5 mages, he just does a ton of damage and he'll one-tap a lot of people. He just reaches a point where he gets outscaled unless you get Nomsy 3-star, so it's more of like top 4ing that's good with Nomsy unless you like turbo high roll into something else later on. But again, you're probably going to be playing Astrals in the early game because it's mages, and then just pivot into Nomsy once you hit Nomsy 2. Also for augments, Axiom Arc is like one of the best things ever for him. If you get that, just like auto force it, you know, I wouldn't be disappointed in that. But onto the next build, we have Zyra Pantheon with Whispers. And this build did take a hit, you know, it's not as strong as it was before, but that doesn't mean it's not playable. Zyra just got a lot weaker in general, but it's still decent because you only need a Zyra 2-star. And if you get Zyra 3, great. If not, it's not the end of the world. You could use this to go into upper levels and then switch into maybe a Xayah build since she uses both the Rageblade and the Runons. Or you could even go into an AO Shin build with the Rageblade. So you have to keep that in mind whenever you're playing this. You don't have to commit yourself to the Zyra. A lot of people, they commit themselves to a comp during like stage 2. And you have to realize if you have flexible augments such as like, let's say Second Wind, or you have Celestial Blessing, you're not forced into this comp, like even though you have the Zyra and you're leaning into it. But of course, you're going to round out your comp with Siphon and Pantheon as well. Those guys are going to be good too. Also, like maybe Siphon, you could focus more itemizing him this patch as well because he is a bit stronger now because they changed him. Onto the next comp, we have the Built Different composition. So if you get like Built Different Gold or Prismatic Augment, I recommend playing it. The Silver one, it's like doable, but I don't like it as much. You focus on like Graves carry, and then you could also use other stuff such as Nilah. Also make sure you play duplicates of same units because this comp really benefits from that. But yeah, you really don't have a set carry. You could use like a bunch of different options as you can see down here, and they all use like pretty similar items, so that's a good thing. But we do have like 2 hours of gameplay over here if you want to check that out. I'll leave a card up top if I remember, so you guys can definitely check that out in your free time for the Built Different comp. Obviously you need the augment, so you can't force this build. But onto the next build, we have Astral Mages. Astral Mages, pretty solid. You know, there are a couple different Lux builds. Right now we have the Shojin, Archangels, and Jeweled Gauntlet build, but there's also a blue buff Morello build that's really, really good. I actually like that one a lot. We go over it in my like Astral climbing video, as you can see in this video over here. I'll try to leave a link to that as well. But this comp's really easy to play. You just go to level 6 and you reroll for Lux 3. Level 6 is really good because you have Sylas, Skarner, Vladimir, Lux, and 2 extra mages. So that could be like Talia Lilia, for example, or just like any mage you get. If you have a mage spatula, you could drop in Zyra as well because she gives you whispers, so that's really nice. But you just slow roll for Lux 3 at level 6 and hopefully you get her. And then after that, you could level up and add in other stuff such as Aurelion Soul, Zoe, things of that nature. A really, really easy comp to play. Next build, Graves Nilah. No one really plays this comp. It's kind of just flexing between different carries. And yeah, like it's not bad. It's just really difficult to play. And the comp you see on your screen right now, it's not always going to be your end game comp. So you have to know when to take units out, when to put units in. Typically, the rule is if it's upgraded, keep it in. If it's not, you want to just play random stuff because you're not really going deep into any synergy, as you guys can see up at the top. You're just playing whoever you hit, and hopefully that carries you throughout the game. It's a very different playstyle, but it's just something to keep in mind. Darkflight Cannoneer with Aphelios. I don't know why you'd be playing this build because you could just play Darkflight Rengar, so not really too much to go in for that. But that is going to be it for the A, B, and C comps. Right now, a lot of the top players are trying to qualify for like the last chance qualifiers in their region to try to get a world spot. But hopefully, unlike League of Legends Worlds, maybe NA can actually win some games. And of course, the item priority is down here. Again, it's the same as last week right now, but of course, it just depends on like your preferences. I really like Belt. Belt's probably my favorite, but some people like Bow and stuff. Belt's good because it allows you to flex into a lot of builds, and I like a lot of the Morello Namicon comps as well. Like I do Morello Lux, I do Morello Lagoon, and it also helps me to build like a Zeke's Herald for Rengar, so it really depends on what you're playing at the end of the day though. But hopefully you guys are going to enjoy this patch. Obviously, S and A tiers, there are too many comps in it that I can't give you guys an excuse to play the B or C tiers right now. Just focus on these. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 comps up here. Obviously, some of them are situational, so maybe you have like 10 comps up here. That's more than enough, you know? Just don't play the B and Cs if you can, because like if there are only maybe 5 comps in the S and A tiers, then maybe, yeah, play the Bs and Cs, but not this time, you know? But hopefully you guys enjoyed this. If you did, go ahead and drop a like below so it could be pushed to other people. But apart from that, I will hopefully see you all next week or in the next video. I think the next video I'm going to do is going to be on Mage Nomsy, just like forcing Mage Nomsy if it exists at the start of the game. Because I've been doing that recently. It's been going like decently. I wouldn't say it's like the most amazing thing in the world, but it is good enough to like climb with. But that's going to be it for me today. Hopefully I will see you guys next time. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to share and subscribe, and of course smash that like button. Each like is an LP I gain before the next video.